So lots of other people have said that they were surprised with the priest leveling experience in Season of Discovery. And as soon as I picked up the class, I could easily see why, and it made me wonder why I waited so long to give this one a try. But if you held off on it like me, you're lucky because it's been buffed multiple times since launch, which made it even better. In this video, we're going to break into the full details. Just remember to subscribe, it's a great idea. Now, starting off at level 1, there are not really any overpowered runes that you could go get super easily or have somebody carry you through. That's totally fine because the starter runes that you get really early are insanely good. We start off just mashing Smite until we get level 5 for wands. Runes that you'll probably want to pick up along the way are Penance, Void Plague, Homunculus, Shadow Word Death, and Prayer Mending. Penance is your first rune at level 3 on your gloves, and that's what all other guys are going to tell you to stick with the entire game. Priest has the unique requirement that in order to get your first few runes, you need at least 1 meditation buff, and for the later ones, you will need 2. There is 1 meditation buff for each race of priest, besides dwarf and human share one. You can get this buff by kneeling in the lore appropriate spot, and or in order to get the other races' meditations, you can kneel at another player with the buffs, and they can /pray to you, and you will get them. It's extremely easy to maintain all 4 buffs, considering they last 4 hours and persist through death, and you can easily find another fully buffed priest in a major city. There's a weak aura that will automatically pray to anybody that kneels at you, so you can spread the buff even if you're AFK. Then as you're level 5, you'll want to get a lesser magic wand. Other ones are fine, but this one is best at 11 DPS and is easily obtainable because it's crafted by enchanters. You'll want to get Void Plague around level 5 as well. As of the December 11th patch, the damage of Void Plague was increased by 200%. It costs less mana, but does 3 to 4 times more damage than Shadow Word Pain. You can have them both up at once, but because of its 6-second cooldown, it makes it kind of annoying and you can't really multi-dot with it. Getting this up is your first priority, even if it won't last the entire duration. Usually you don't want to do that with dots, but its damage is just so ridiculously overloaded, lots of priests even keep this on whenever they're healing in late game. After that, your next target is Homunculus around level 8. Their damage was also buffed by 100%. It's free damage and costs you absolutely nothing. It doesn't even cost any mana. Tons of people complain about the attack patterns of them, but I didn't really find it all that annoying. If you've done any escort quests before, their behavior isn't really that surprising. They will occasionally go off and do something weird, but the major downside is they don't really notice anything 15 or 20 yards away from them. If you accidentally pull something, they can hold aggro on it, but as soon as you deal damage, you'll probably rip it off. Now for the last and most important leveling rune, around level 10, you'll be able to get Shadow Word Death, and as of December 21st, its damage was increased by 103%, making it always deal about 1/3 more damage than Penance with the same cooldown. Penance is way more easier to use, so if you're a new player, it's a fine option for you to keep it on the whole time, but the fun minigame of perfectly executing the mobs as soon as they enter the minimum damage range I found to be extremely enjoyable and rewarding. You will need an add-on or weak aura to tell you how much health the mobs have, and if you mess it up, you take full damage from the Shadow Word Death, which you might not think is a big deal, but it could easily kill you. This thing hits really hard. It roughly does 10 times your level in damage, so at level 11, it's approximately 110 damage-ish, which depending on your level is a significant fraction of the mob's health, maybe like 1/3 or 1/2 of it. I highly recommend getting Darkmoon Fair buff when you can, because then you can mentally add 10% onto that minimum threshold. At level 13, you could upgrade to the Greater Magic Wand, clocking in at 17 DPS, also crafted by enchanters, which should not only outdamage other wands, but also your non-rune abilities. And this wand will probably last you until around level 20. My rotation the rest of the game was throwing up Void Plague on pull, and then wanding until I could execute the mob with Shadow Word Death, unless if it was on cooldown. If you're using Penance instead, you probably Void Plague on pull into Penance, and then wand it until it dies. And while you could precast something before you throw up the Void Plague, it's just so unnecessary. The only weak auras I used were this one that tracks if my homunculus are still alive, and this wand bar, which I made to look really cool, so you can find them both in my Discord if you want them. You might also want something that tracks Shadow Word Death's cooldown, and it's entirely possible to make one that would alert you or glow whenever the mob is in the minimum kill threshold of the Shadow Word Death. I just don't know how to make that, but if I find one, I will throw it in the Discord for you guys as well. If you're fighting really low level mobs and Void Plague is only going to do 1 or 2 ticks, it might be a good idea to skip it if you have Shadow Word Death up. The key thing with Death is you always want to be watching mobs' health and see how quickly you could just snap execute them. Do not be afraid to solo extremely difficult quests. Our damage is stupidly high. With Void Plague alone, you can eat through an entire elite while just running around, which is really easy to do with the world buff move speed, even though I don't even have it in this clip. I'd also recommend doing some dungeons because you're a healer, and to upgrade your Greater Magic Wand and not have to buy a Star Collar from the auction house. You can get Cookie Stirring Rod from Dead Mines or the Fire Belcher from a Wailing Caverns rare with a pretty good spawn rate. The speed of the wand is the speed of the global cooldown on your other abilities while you're wanding to prevent you from weaving them in. Because of this, faster wands are better. That way when you cancel the wand, you can cast the death quicker and kill the mob. It's a little tricky to pull multiple mobs because of your cooldowns, but it's entirely possible and a good idea anytime that you can manage it. After level 20, you have Holy Fire, so you can precast that if you have a particularly hard fight, but it's really not worth the 3-second cast unless if you know that you're going to have trouble. There really isn't all that much else to talk about since you're pretty much doing the same thing the entire leveling experience. doesn't really change. But when you do hit 25, it should be pretty easy to jump into BFD as a healer, which is what I did because that's mostly what priests are good for. I did 25 and went and got a few of my healing runes that I was missing, like Prayer of Mending, and then got summoned into a random BFD literally 5 minutes later. For your first run, you ideally want the scenario where you have another geared priest with you that can almost solo heal the dungeon, so you only really have to pay attention sometimes, and you can just penance on cooldown and then maybe flash heal some people in wand. If you know the run is going to be like this, keep using homunculus and void plague just for more damage for your raid. But if you do actually have to heal in your run, you want to use either healing rune on your chest and prayer mending on your legs, and then just penance and palm on cooldown. But ideally want to hit up the auction house and grab up as much int gear as you can afford. Maybe do some pre-quests to get that gold and try to have like 1800 mana. I only had like 1400, but I kind of weaseled my way into this group. They had somebody leave at like the last minute and just wanted to go. Don't worry about plus healing or spirit on your gear. You just want a massive mana pool. That way you can keep using your 2 rune abilities on cooldown. Other people can also see your max mana, so it might be a dead giveaway that you just hit 25 if you have a really low mana pool. But with 2 healers, this raid is extremely easy. Even with mediocre DPS, I was wanting like 90% of the time. You can respec into inner focus, meditation, and healing focus, which is the recommended raid healing spec for priest, but it's fine if you forget. These really don't matter that much. In summary, I could not believe how good this was. I almost did this entire thing in one sitting, and I might level another one, to be honest. It is straight up overtuned. From your damage runes to your healing runes, the base values on them are just really high, which makes it an insane leveling class. Kind of reminds me of Star Surge Druid, but even better. This one might be the best class. There was just never a period where you're having a hard time or slow at doing really anything. The only real downside of the class is all this crazy high base damage doesn't really end up scaling that well in raids, which is what makes healing really the only viable thing to do. But it is way more sturdy out on its own, which is a stark contrast compared to the normal vanilla priest experience. We have to see how the class plays out the rest of the game. I know that they mentioned smite priest, so maybe I'll do that with this character. Overall, I would highly recommend giving it a shot if you're bored and looking for something to do before the next phase comes out. You'll be max level in no time. It's extremely low effort to pug a raid as a healer, and getting that quest wand from BFD is going to make getting to 40 even easier. Thanks for watching, and if you're thinking about leveling another class, check out my videos for the rest of them. I have a big playlist right here.